The emergency meeting had been going on for 3 hours, and Admiral Ralph could feel the tension building in the chamber. Representatives from 12 different species filled the council room, their translators creating a low hum of overlapping voices. Everyone wanted answers about the strange ship that kept appearing across their territories. Ralph studied the holographic display floating above the table. A single vessel marked only as Wanderer 7 had crossed through 17 different star systems in the past 3 weeks. No weapon signatures, no hostile actions, just movement, steady and purposeful, like someone following a map only they could see. "It activated the defense grid on Outpost Teller," said Commander Vosh, his scales rippling with agitation. "Those systems have been dormant for 10,000 years. What kind of technology does this human possess?" "The question we should ask is why," Ralph replied, his voice calm despite the growing alarm around him. "The human has not fired on anyone, has not stolen anything. Why activate ancient systems?" A junior analyst stepped forward, her forearms gesturing at the display. "Admiral, we have detected a pattern. Every location the human visits shows the same result. Pirate activity stops. Raider bases go silent. Slave traders abandon their posts." "So this human is some kind of vigilante?" another council member asked. "Or a weapon," Vosh snapped. "A weapon we do not understand." Ralph had reviewed the files on humans before this meeting. They had joined the galactic community only 40 years ago after ending their own devastating wars. They offered medicine, engineering, and diplomacy. Their ships were not the fastest or most powerful, but humans had a reputation for solving problems in unexpected ways. This situation felt different, though. One human alone, moving through space like a ghost. "We have tried to contact this vessel," Ralph asked. 73 times, the analyst confirmed. "No response. The ship appears, stays for a few hours, then vanishes. Our sensors barely track it." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some wanted to classify the human as a threat. Others argued for caution. Ralph listened to them all, but his mind kept returning to one detail. The locations the human visited were not random. They were old, forgotten, places the galaxy had left behind. "What do we know about these systems?" Ralph asked. Interrupting the arguments, "The ones the human keeps visiting." The analyst pulled up new data. Most were abandoned decades ago. Some were quarantine zones. A few were sites of distress calls that were never answered. Something cold settled in Ralph's chest. Distress calls that were never answered. He had served in the fleet for 30 years. He knew how bureaucracy worked, how some calls got lost, how political considerations sometimes outweighed moral ones. He had never liked it, but he had followed orders. "I propose we deploy a task force to intercept and detain this human," Vosh declared. "We cannot allow unauthorized access to restricted zones. We cannot permit the activation of ancient technology. This human must be stopped." The vote came quickly, too quickly, Ralph thought. Fear made people act without thinking. The council authorized a combined fleet of 500 warships to hunt down one human vessel. It was absurd. It was overwhelming. It was also revealing. They were not afraid of what the human might do. They were afraid of what the human might have already found. Ralph accepted command of the operation because he wanted to understand. As the council chamber emptied, he remained behind, studying the data. The human ship had basic specifications: modified civilian transport, enhanced sensors, medical equipment, nothing that suggested military purpose. "Admiral," the analyst approached him quietly, "I found something else. The human pilot has been downloading data from communication relays at each location, old transmissions, archive material." "What kind of data?" "Distress signals, emergency broadcasts. Some of them are 40 years old." Ralph closed his eyes. He understood now, or at least he thought he did. This human was not searching for treasure or weapons or territory. This human was searching for something far more dangerous to the Council's reputation: the truth. His fleet assembled quickly. 500 ships from different species united in one purpose. They would find this human. They would stop whatever investigation was happening. Ralph gave the order to jump to hyperspace, following the predicted path of Wanderer 7. As his ship entered the void between stars, Ralph pulled up the human databases. He searched for information about their culture, their values, their history. One phrase appeared repeatedly in human literature: "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." The human pilot had a name according to the registration files: David Cole. Age 47, former occupation listed as Emergency Response Coordinator, no military service, no criminal record. The file included a personal note: family deceased in colonial disaster, failure of rescue protocol. Ralph read those words 3 times: family deceased, failure of rescue protocol. He looked at the map of systems David Cole had visited, each one marked with an old distress call. Each one a place where someone had called for help and received silence. The human was not investigating the council. The human was answering calls that should have been answered years ago. David Cole was finishing rescues that never happened. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace near an asteroid field in the outer rim. Sensors immediately detected Wanderer 7 docked at an ancient relay station. Ralph gave the order to approach slowly. No weapons charged. No aggressive posture. He wanted to talk before anyone started shooting. But before his communications officer could send a hail, David Cole's ship detached from the relay and began moving. Fast. The human had detected them. "Should we fire, Admiral?" his weapons officer asked. Ralph watched the small ship weaving through the asteroids, running not toward safety but toward something else. His sensors showed another system ahead, marked in red on the charts: Quarantine Zone, Plague Risk, Forbidden Entry. "No weapons," Ralph ordered. "Follow him, I want to see where he goes." The chase had begun, but Ralph suspected they were not chasing a criminal. They were chasing someone who refused to forget. Someone who refused to let the past stay buried. Someone who believed that unanswered calls still deserved answers. 500 warships pursued one human across the stars, and Ralph wondered which side of this hunt would end up regretting it more. David Cole had not expected company, and he certainly had not expected an entire armada. His sensor array lit up with contacts the moment he disconnected from the relay station. 500 ships, maybe more, all pointed at him. His first instinct was to broadcast an explanation, to tell them he was just a civilian doing research. But the weapons lock warnings changed his mind. Someone had decided he was dangerous before even asking questions. Running seemed like the better option. The asteroid field offered some cover. His ship was small and maneuverable, designed for search and rescue work rather than combat. He had modified it over the years with better sensors and enhanced shielding, equipment meant to find people in debris fields and damaged stations. Now those same tools helped him stay alive as massive warships tried to corner him. David's hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency. He had spent 20 years coordinating emergency responses across Earth's colonies. He knew how to navigate dangerous environments. He knew how to find paths others missed. The asteroids became allies, their irregular orbits creating narrow channels he could slip through while the larger ships had to go around. "This is Admiral Ralph of the Combined Fleet. Unidentified human vessel, power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." The voice came through on the universal channel, calm and professional. David almost complied, almost, but something in his gut told him that boarding would mean the end of his mission. They would confiscate his data. They would ask why he was visiting restricted zones. They would make him explain things that should not need explanation. "With respect, Admiral, I have broken no laws," David transmitted back. "I am conducting humanitarian research. There is no reason for weapons lock. You have entered quarantine zones and activated defense systems in restricted space. These actions require explanation." David checked his navigation display. The quarantine system was 3 jumps away. The place where a distress signal had originated 30 years ago, marked as Plague Zone, declared off-limits. He had the medical data, though. He had spent months studying the reports. The plague was not what they claimed. I am heading to the Kelvin system, David said. There are people there who need help. Silence followed his transmission. David used the time to plot his jump, calculating the precise moment when he would have enough distance from the asteroids to engage his hyperspace drive. The fleet was repositioning, trying to cut off his escape routes. The Kelvin system is under permanent quarantine, Ralph's voice returned. Entry is forbidden. The contagion is fatal. The contagion is fungal spores, David replied. Dangerous but treatable. I have the medical specifications. I have the treatment protocols. The quarantine was based on incorrect analysis. More silence, David counted. Down the seconds, his jump drive reached full charge. He aimed for the gap between two capital ships, accelerating hard. All vessels do not fire, Ralph's order cut through the fleet communications. Repeat, hold fire. David appreciated that at least. The admiral could have ordered his ship destroyed. Instead, the fleet tried to block him physically. Ships moved to intercept, creating a wall of metal and energy shields. David angled toward the smallest gap, a space barely wider than his ship. He made it through with meters to spare, hull sensors screaming proximity alerts. The jump drive engaged and space folded around him. The fleet disappeared, replaced by the swirling colors of hyperspace. David allowed himself one deep breath before beginning preparations for the next jump. They would follow him, they would try to stop him, but they would also see what he had found. Maybe that was what scared them most. His data archive contained 40 years of suppressed information, distress calls that had been filed and forgotten, emergency broadcasts that never received responses, colony disasters where rescue ships were delayed for political reasons. He had not set out to expose anyone. He had set out to find out what happened to his daughter. Rebecca Cole had died in a colonial accident when she was 19. The disaster had killed 200 people. The official report blamed equipment failure. David had believed that for 5 years. Then he found the distress call in an old database. The call his daughter had sent 18 hours before the accident became fatal. The call that was acknowledged but never answered because the colony was in a disputed territory, and no one wanted to authorize a rescue mission that might create diplomatic problems. By the time someone made a decision, Rebecca and everyone else were dead. David had quit his job that day. He sold everything he owned and bought Wanderer 7. He started following the trail of distress calls, checking each location, documenting what really happened. Most of the time he found empty stations and sad stories. Sometimes he found survivors. The Kelvin system was different. The distress call there had repeated for 2 years before someone finally classified the whole area as plague zone. After that, the call stopped. The official record said everyone died. David had found medical reports, though, buried in archives. The fungal spores were dangerous, but not fatal. They caused respiratory problems, nothing more. Treatment existed. If the colony had been quarantined for political reasons rather than medical ones, if people had been left to die because admitting the truth would expose bureaucratic failure, then David needed to know. He needed to document it. Not for revenge, not for justice, just so that Rebecca and all the others would not be forgotten. His ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kelvin system. Long-range sensors showed a moon with sealed habitats, power signatures, life signs. Someone was still alive down there after 30 years. David began his approach, checking his medical supplies and treatment equipment. Behind him, 500 warships were calculating his position, preparing their own jumps. Admiral Ralph would arrive soon. David needed to work fast. He activated his communication systems and broadcast on all frequencies. This is David Cole aboard Wanderer 7. If anyone can hear this transmission, I am here to help. I have medical supplies and treatment protocols. I am not with the quarantine authority. I am just someone who does not think you should have been forgotten. The reply came 30 seconds later, a voice weak with disbelief and hope. Is this real? Is someone actually coming? David smiled despite everything. Yes, I am coming. Not on my watch will you be abandoned again. The colony on Kelvin's moon looked like it had been holding on through sheer stubbornness. Sealed domes connected by pressurized tunnels, all of them patched and repaired so many times that David could barely see the original construction. He landed his ship near the largest dome and began unloading medical supplies. The colonists emerged slowly, as if they could not quite believe he was real. 23 people, mostly older now, wearing environmental suits that had been maintained well past their expected lifespan. A woman who introduced herself as Dr. Yana approached first. "You said you have treatment protocols?" Her voice carried decades of hope that had been disappointed before. David handed her a data pad. "The spores cause respiratory inflammation and tissue scarring, but they are not infectious in the traditional sense. They spread through specific atmospheric conditions that do not exist inside sealed environments. You were never in danger of spreading plague. The quarantine was unnecessary." Yana read through the data, her hands shaking. "We told them this 30 years ago when they sealed us in here. We sent our medical findings. We proved the spores only affected people exposed in the first outbreak, but no one listened." "They listened," David said quietly. "They just decided that admitting their mistake was worse than leaving you here." Admiral Ralph arrived 2 hours later with 3 ships. David watched them land, keeping his hands visible and his posture non-threatening. He had nothing to hide. The truth was documented in the colony's own records. Ralph emerged in full environmental gear, his security team surrounding him. The Admiral was tall, even for his species, with dark plating that marked him as a senior officer. His eyes studied David with an intensity that suggested he was reevaluating everything he thought he knew. "David Cole," Ralph said, "you are under arrest for violating quarantine protocols and unauthorized entry into restricted space." "Arrest me after you talk to them," David replied, gesturing to the colonists. "After you see their medical records, after you read the distress calls they sent for 2 years before someone decided it was easier to classify them as dead." Yana stepped forward, removing her helmet. Ralph's security team tensed, but the Admiral raised a hand to stop them. "The quarantine is based on fungal contamination," Ralph said carefully. "The quarantine is based on covering up bureaucratic failure," Yana replied. "We were a small colony in disputed territory. When the spore outbreak happened, we called for help. We sent detailed medical data. We explained that the danger was past. But someone decided that sending rescue ships might give legitimacy to territorial claims, so they classified us as plague victims and moved on." Ralph was silent for a long moment. His security team shifted uncomfortably. David could see the Admiral processing information, connecting pieces that probably confirmed suspicions he had been developing during the chase. "Show me your records," Ralph said finally. The next hour passed in tense silence as Ralph reviewed 3 decades of documentation. Distress calls sent and acknowledged but never answered. Medical reports showing the spores were contained. Supply requests that went ignored. The colony had survived by salvaging, by growing food in underground chambers, by making every resource last far longer than it should have been. "Possible. Why did you not try to leave?" Ralph asked Yana. "We had no ships. The quarantine order impounded our vessels. We were told rescue was coming. Then we were told to wait. Then we were told nothing at all. The last transmission we received from the Council was 12 years ago, confirming our status as Plague Zone." Ralph turned to David. "You found this by accessing old communication relays." "I found this by checking every distress call that was marked as resolved but never showed rescue operations," David corrected. "There are hundreds of them. This colony is just one. I have been visiting them, one by one, finding out what really happened." "And the ancient defense systems you activated?" "Distress amplifiers," Yana interjected. "Old technology designed to broadcast emergency signals across multiple channels. David activated them because we asked him to. We wanted people to know we were still here." Ralph's translator was quiet for almost a minute, suggesting the admiral was sub-vocalizing, probably communicating with his fleet. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, maybe even ashamed. The Council will want to suppress this information. I know, David said. That is why I am broadcasting it. Every relay I pass, every communication hub I can reach. The truth is already spreading. You can arrest me, but you cannot stop what people are learning. The Council sent 500 ships to stop you. They authorized force if necessary. David met Ralph's eyes steadily. Then I will die doing what I should have done when my daughter called for help. I will die making sure someone answered. Ralph stood very still. His security team waited for orders. The colonists watched with expressions that mixed hope and fear. David remained calm, ready for whatever came next. I joined the fleet to protect people, Ralph said slowly. To serve the ideals of the Council, to maintain peace and order across the galaxy. But if that peace requires abandoning colonies to die slowly, if that order means burying distress calls because they are politically inconvenient, then I have been serving the wrong ideals. The Admiral removed his helmet, breathing the colony's air despite regulations. It was a gesture of solidarity that needed no translation. I will not arrest you, David Cole. I will escort you to your next location, and I will ensure the Council knows that some of us still remember what duty actually means. Yana exhaled in relief. The colonists began to react, some crying, some laughing, all of them processing the reality that their isolation was finally ending. David nodded to Ralph, respect passing between them. There are 17 more colonies on my list. Some might have no survivors, but they all deserve to have their stories told. Then we tell them together, Ralph said. But you should know half my fleet still follows Council orders. They will try to stop us. David smiled grimly. Let them try. Not on my watch will these people be forgotten again. News traveled fast in the connected galaxy. By the time David and Ralph left Kelvin's moon, 6 major news networks had picked up the story. The ancient distress amplifiers were doing exactly what they were designed to do, broadcasting on frequencies that could not be easily blocked. Commander Vosh contacted Ralph 3 hours into their journey to the next location. His image appeared on the bridge display, scales darkened with anger. You have exceeded your authority, Admiral. The Council has ordered David Cole's immediate arrest and the suppression of all data he has collected. Ralph stood firm. I have reviewed that data, Commander. It documents criminal negligence on a massive scale, colonies abandoned, distress calls buried, lives thrown away for political convenience. Those are allegations that require investigation through proper channels. Those are facts supported by the colony's own records. I will not participate in covering them up. Then you are relieved of command. Vosh's declaration came with cold finality. Return to Harmony Station immediately for disciplinary proceedings. Any ships that follow your rebellion will face the same consequences. The connection severed. Ralph looked at his bridge crew, seeing uncertainty in their faces. He had just thrown away a 30-year career. He had branded himself a mutineer. His officers needed to know he understood what he was asking of them. Anyone who wishes to comply with Commander Vosh's orders may do so without prejudice, Ralph announced. I will not hold it against you. What I am doing goes against every protocol, every regulation, every chain of command principle we have sworn to uphold. But sometimes the rules exist to protect systems that should not be protected. His communications officer, a young female named Sala, spoke first. My mother's colony lost half its population in an industrial accident. They called for rescue ships. The ships arrived 4 days late because someone thought their emergency was not urgent enough. I want to know how many other families got the same treatment. One by one, his crew declared their positions. Not all stayed. 2 officers requested transfer to the Loyalist ships. Ralph approved it immediately, even gave them commendations for following their conscience, but most remained. In the end, 247 ships sided with Ralph. 253 stayed loyal to the council. The fleet divided, taking positions across the void like ancient armies preparing for battle. David watched from Wanderer 7, uncomfortable with being the cause of so much conflict. "This is not what I wanted. I just wanted to help people." "Sometimes helping people requires challenging those in power," Ralph replied over their private channel. "Your people must have learned that lesson many times." "Too many times," David agreed. "We are not always good at remembering it, though." The next distress call on David's list was 6 jumps away, a mining colony that had reported structural failures in their habitat domes 15 years ago. The official record said evacuation was successful. David's research suggested otherwise. The colony had been in debt to a corporate entity that would profit from insurance claims if the colony was declared a total loss. As the rebel fleet prepared to jump, emergency transmissions began flooding in from across the sector. Not distress calls from the past, but current ones. Refugee transports under attack, medical ships stranded, small colonies reporting raiders. "This is intentional," Sala said, studying the pattern. "These attacks are coordinated. Someone is creating emergencies to divide our attention." Ralph understood immediately. The council wants us to choose between helping David document the past or responding to current crises. Either choice makes us look bad. David listened to the emergency calls, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. Every rescue instinct he had screamed at him to respond. These were people dying right now, not 30 years ago. "We split up," he said. "Some ships continue to the mining colony, others respond to the emergencies." "That will weaken both groups," Ralph countered. "The Loyalist fleet will have numerical superiority." "I did not start this mission because it was safe. I started it because it was necessary." David pulled up the emergency calls, sorting them by severity. "These raids are following a pattern. They are hitting ships near communication relays and data hubs. Whoever is behind this wants to stop information from spreading." Understanding dawned on Ralph's face. "If we respond to the raids, we can secure the relays, ensure your data continues broadcasting, and expose whatever operation is trying to silence it." The rebel fleet divided. Ralph took 100 ships toward the mining colony. The rest split into rapid response groups, each heading toward a different emergency. David attached himself to a group led by Captain Fenn, a grizzled officer who had fought in border wars before joining the fleet. They arrived at a refugee transport under attack from 5 raider vessels. The raiders were using surplus military equipment, well-organized and disciplined, not the usual criminal opportunists. "These are professionals," Fenn observed. "Someone hired them." David's ship was not built for combat, but his rescue equipment proved useful in unexpected ways. While Fenn's ships engaged the raiders, David positioned Wanderer 7 near the damaged transport. He launched repair drones to stabilize the hull breaches. He activated high-intensity lights that blinded raider targeting sensors. He broadcast false heat signatures that confused their missiles. The raiders broke off, retreating toward a nearby nebula. Fenn wanted to pursue, but David stopped him. "The transport needs immediate help. The raiders are gone. Let us focus on saving lives instead of taking them." Fenn reluctantly agreed. They spent the next 2 hours evacuating refugees, stabilizing injuries, and distributing supplies. David worked alongside alien crew members, his experience in emergency coordination making him a natural leader. One of the refugees, an elderly being whose species David did not recognize, gripped his arm as medical staff carried him to safety. "Why are you doing this? You do not know us. We have nothing to offer you." David thought about Rebecca, about all the people who had called for help and received silence, about the colonies still waiting on his list. Because someone should have done it 30 years ago. Because every time we fail to answer, we make it easier to ignore the next call. Because humans learn the hard way that looking away from suffering does not make it disappear. It just makes us smaller. The refugee did not fully understand, but he nodded anyway. Recognition passed between them, the universal language of gratitude. As they finished the rescue, Salah contacted David with news. 6 other emergency calls had been answered by rebel ships. All showed the same pattern: professional raiders, attacks near communication infrastructure. And in each case, the raiders carried equipment traced back to military contracts with Council member states. The evidence was building. Someone with power and resources was trying desperately to stop the truth from spreading. They were creating chaos to distract and divide. They were turning David's mission into a crisis. But they had miscalculated. Every attack proved the point David had been making all along. Some people in power valued secrecy more than lives. The mining colony was worse than David had imagined. Ralph's group found it 3 days after splitting from the main fleet. The habitat domes had failed exactly as reported 15 years ago. What the official records did not mention was that 63 colonists had survived the initial collapse by sealing themselves in the deep mining shafts. They had lived underground for 15 years, growing mushrooms in the dark, recycling air through improvised filters, slowly dying as equipment failed and hope faded. When Ralph's ships arrived, only 9 were still alive. David listened to their story through subspace relay, his ship still 2 jumps away with Captain Fenn's group. The miners had sent distress calls for 3 months. The corporation that owned the mining rights had acknowledged the calls but never sent rescue. Insurance money was worth more than rescue operations. The council had investigated, found the corporation at fault, then quietly buried the findings to avoid economic disruption. 9 survivors from 63. 9 people who had lived in darkness for 15 years because someone decided profit mattered more than lives. "I cannot do this anymore," Fenn said quietly, standing beside David on Wanderer 7's small bridge. "I have served in the fleet for 18 years. I believed we were the good ones. I believed we protected people." "You still can," David replied. "That is why you are here instead of with Vosh's ships." "But how many more colonies are on your list? How many more failures will we find?" "All of them until people stop forgetting, until the system changes." Before Fenn could respond, proximity alarms sounded. A massive fleet emerged from hyperspace. Not rebel ships, not loyalist ships, something else entirely. "Identify yourselves," Fenn transmitted. The response came from dozens of civilian vessels, transports and cargo haulers and colony ships. Their hulls bore markings from systems David had visited. Kelvin's moon, the Outer Rim settlements, refugee groups he had helped. "We are the Wanderers," said a voice David recognized. Dr. Yana from Kelvin's moon. "We heard what happened at the mining colony. We heard about the attacks on refugee ships. We decided we are done waiting for the council to decide our lives are worth protecting." David felt something catch in his throat. "You should not be here. This is going to get dangerous." "It has been dangerous for 30 years, Yana replied. "The difference is now we have someone who actually cares. We are not letting you stand alone." More ships arrived over the next hour, not just from colonies David had helped, but from others who had heard the broadcasts. Settlements that had been ignored, stations that had been forgotten, outposts that survived despite official indifference. They came together, forming a fleet of their own. Commander Vosh contacted them within the hour, his image appearing across all channels. "Attention, unregistered vessels. You are operating in violation of space traffic protocols. Disperse immediately or face detention." "We are not criminals," Yana responded. "We are citizens who have been failed by the system we trusted. We have a right to exist. We have a right to tell our stories. And we have a right to support those who actually helped us when no one else would." "You are supporting a fugitive. You are aiding in the distribution of classified information." "We are supporting truth," said another voice, a colony administrator from the Outer Rim. "If truth is classified, then classification is the crime." The standoff developed quickly. Vosh's loyalist fleet positioned themselves between the civilian ships and David's location. Ralph's rebel ships formed a defensive screen. The Wanderers, as they called themselves, stayed in the middle, unarmed but determined. David reviewed his tactical display, hating what he saw. Hundreds of ships facing each other across the void, people ready to fight and die over information that should have been public all along. "I need to surrender," David said quietly. "Absolutely not," Ralph replied immediately. "Look at this situation. People are going to die because I wanted to document bureaucratic failure. That is not worth it." "Those people chose to come here," Fen interjected. "They chose to stand with you. Taking that choice away from them is exactly what the Council has been doing all along." David wanted to argue, but Sala interrupted them. "We have incoming, multiple vessels, unknown configuration." The new arrivals appeared in perfect formation. 6 massive ships, clearly military but bearing no faction markers. They positioned themselves above the civilian fleet, weapons clearly visible but not charged. A transmission came through, audio-only male voice speaking in clear common language. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the Human Defense Initiative. We received reports that one of our citizens was being hunted by an armada. We came to make sure he is treated fairly." David had not called Earth, had not asked for help. Humanity's small defense fleet was meant to protect their own colonies, not project power across the galaxy. "You have no jurisdiction here," Vosh declared. "We have jurisdiction over our citizens' safety," Rodriguez replied calmly. "David Cole is a civilian engaged in humanitarian work. The fact that 500 warships were deployed to stop him suggests this is not about law enforcement. This is about suppression. Human, you do not understand galactic politics. I understand that my government will be very interested in why the Galactic Council considers documenting distress calls to be a threat requiring military force. I understand that Earth's membership in the Council is up for review next year. And I understand that humans have a tendency to ask uncomfortable questions when we feel our people are being treated unjustly." Vosh was silent for a long moment. David could imagine the calculations happening. Humans were new to galactic politics, but Earth's population was large and growing. Human colonies were expanding. Starting a conflict with humanity over one man's documentation project was probably not worth it. "This matter will be resolved through diplomatic channels," Vosh finally said. "Agreed. Until then, David Cole is under human protection. Anyone who wants to arrest him can file formal charges through proper legal channels." The Loyalist fleet held position but did not advance. Ralph's rebels maintained their defensive screen. The civilian wanderers remained in place, silent witnesses to everything happening. David looked at the display showing Rodriguez's ship. "Why did you come?" "Because your mission was broadcast across every relay you passed. Because humans on Earth saw what you were doing and decided it represented the best of what we should be. Because when one of us stands up for what is right, the rest of us should have their back. Is that not what you have been doing all along?" David had no answer. He had started this journey to honor his daughter's memory. He had continued it because people deserved to be remembered. Somehow it had become something larger, a movement, a challenge to systems that protected themselves instead of the people they were supposed to serve. "The mining survivors need medical attention," David said finally. "And I have 12 more colonies on my list. I would appreciate the escort." "That is what we are here for," Rodriguez replied. The fleets reorganized. Some of Vosh's ships quietly drifted toward the rebel formation, their crews making choices they would have to live with. The Wanderers began rescue operations for the mining survivors. Human ships took positions alongside Ralph's vessels. And David Cole, the man 500 ships had been sent to stop, continued his mission with an alliance he never expected but absolutely deserved. 6 months passed before David finished visiting every colony on his list. Some were empty. Some had survivors. All had stories that deserved to be told. The galaxy watched through broadcasts that could no longer be suppressed. Public pressure forced the Council to act. Investigations began. Officials resigned. Some faced criminal charges. Emergency response protocols were completely restructured. Every distress call would now be tracked publicly, response times published, outcomes documented. The changes came too late for the thousands who had died waiting for help, but they would save lives in the future. David did not attend the ceremonies where he was honored. He did not accept medals or titles or offers of citizenship from grateful colonies. He watched from his ship as others celebrated reforms he had accidentally triggered. He felt uncomfortable with all of it. "You should be down there," Ralph said, visiting David. Aboard Wanderer 7, the Admiral had been fully cleared of mutiny charges. More than that, he had been promoted and given command of the new independent emergency response fleet. "I did not do this for recognition," David replied. "I did it because someone had to." That is exactly why people want to honor you. Anyone can seek glory. Very few people do necessary work simply because it is necessary. David looked at the data pad showing his complete archive. Every distress call, every buried report, every colony that had been forgotten. The database was now maintained by the Council itself, updated daily, available to anyone who wanted to check. "My daughter called for help and no one came," David said quietly. "I could not save her, but I could make sure others were not forgotten the same way. That was enough. That had to be enough." "It was more than enough," said Dr. Yana, joining them on the bridge. She had become spokesperson for the Wanderers, the civilian organization that had grown from a few dozen ships to hundreds. They operated independently now, checking on remote colonies, responding to emergencies the official fleet could not reach quickly. "We have a proposal," Yana continued. "The Wanderers want you to captain our flagship, train our crews, help us build something that lasts." David shook his head. "I am not a leader. I am just someone who checks on people others forgot." "That is exactly what we need. Someone who remembers that behind every distress call is a person who deserves an answer." Before David could respond, his communication system activated. A new signal, not distress but informational. A colony he had visited 8 months ago, one of the first on his list. They were sending an update. David opened the transmission. Video showed children playing in repaired habitat domes, adults working on agriculture projects, a community rebuilding itself after years of isolation. At the end of the message, a young girl appeared. "My teacher said you are the one who found us, who made sure people knew we were here. I wanted to say thank you. My mom says that because of you, I get to grow up with a future." The transmission ended. David sat very still, processing emotions he had not allowed himself to feel for a long time. He had spent 6 years chasing ghosts, documenting failures, trying to honor his daughter by making sure no one else died forgotten. Somewhere along the way, it had become about more than Rebecca. It had become about every person who called for help and deserved to be heard. "I will help train your crews," David said finally to Yana. "But I cannot stay in one place. There are too many colonies, too many forgotten corners of the galaxy. Someone needs to keep checking on them." "Then take a new ship," Ralph offered. "A proper vessel with crew and support. Let others share the burden you have been carrying alone." David considered it. For 6 years he had worked in isolation, trusting no one, expecting no help. The galaxy had changed around him, though. The Wanderers existed. Emergency protocols were reformed. People were paying attention now. "A small crew," David agreed. "People who understand this is not about glory or adventure. This is about showing up when no one else will." Over the next month, David interviewed volunteers. Most he turned away. They wanted excitement, or they wanted to be heroes, or they wanted to be part of something famous. He found 5 people who understood: a medical officer who had lost family in a delayed rescue, an engineer who had survived colony failures twice, a communications specialist who grew up on a station everyone ignored, 2 pilots who simply believed checking on people was important work. They took a new ship, better equipped than Wanderer 7, but still focused on rescue rather than combat. David named it Wanderer 8, continuing the mission that had cost him everything and given him purpose. His crew settled into routines. They checked on remote colonies. They verified emergency response protocols were being followed. They investigated when distress calls seemed delayed or ignored, not hunting for scandals but ensuring the reforms actually worked. David found that having a crew changed things. He could not obsess the way he had before. He had to sleep. He had to eat. He had to trust others to share the watch. It was hard at first, letting go of the isolation that had protected him from additional loss, but slowly he adjusted. One evening, sitting in the small observation room while the ship traveled through hyperspace, David opened a file he had not accessed in months. Rebecca's picture, her last transmission, the distress call that had started everything. "I hope I made you proud," he said to the image. "I hope wherever you are, you know that people are safer because of what happened to you. That sounds terrible. Making your death means something, but it is all I have." The door opened. His medical officer, Dr. Penn, entered quietly. "We received 3 new requests today, colonies asking for wellness checks. Not emergencies, just people wanting to make sure someone knows they exist." "We will visit all 3, David replied. "There will always be more," Penn observed. "We cannot check on every colony, cannot answer every call." "No, but we can answer today's calls. That has to be enough." Penn nodded and left. David remained, looking at Rebecca's picture a moment longer before closing the file. He could not bring her back, could not change the past, but he could honor her memory by making sure others received the help she never got. Wanderer 8 continued through hyperspace, carrying a crew dedicated to a simple mission: check on people others forgot, answer calls others ignored, show up when no one else would. The galaxy had sent 500 warships to stop one human. They discovered too late that some things could not be stopped with force. Truth spread, examples inspired, and determination to do the right thing even when difficult could not be suppressed. David Cole would never be famous. Most people would forget his name within a generation. But the children who grew up in colonies he found, the families who survived because someone checked on them, the systems that reformed because failures were documented, these would remain. Not the invisible hero people celebrated, but the invisible guardian people needed. Working quietly, checking consistently, ensuring that in a galaxy of billions, no one died alone and forgotten if he could possibly prevent it. That was enough. That would always be enough.